Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Weekly Academics and you're listening to Faiza Inamdar. So today we're doing the fourth podcast of Rise of Indian Nationalism. This is the fourth part. So in this podcast, we're going to look into the influence of Western education, press and literature. So we studied about social reform movements and how India was economically exploited and certain repressive colonial policies also. Now let's look into the influence of Western education and the press in Indian literature. Okay, so this plays an important role in the entire struggle and we're going to look into how it actually contributed into the struggle towards Indian independence. So let's dive into it. First, let's discuss the influence of Western education. So in that period of time, as we studied in the previous chapter also, that Western education was coming into picture and it was kind of a threat for some people. But in this part, we're going to get to know how Western education was a boon to the Indians. Okay, so Britishers brought in the Western education into India with the aim of benefiting their own self, right? So because they understood English, they wanted people in India to understand English so that they could communicate easily, right? So all the public offices had educated people who knew how to speak and who knew English as a language, right? But Indians found a way to use this English language as a boon for their own self. So young people had started taking education and some of them even went to England to take further education. So how did this Western education really help? Number one was that it gave educated youth throughout the country a common language to communicate in. Earlier, people knew only their vernacular language and mostly they knew Hindi to be a common language. But now they had English as a common language and they could communicate across the country with the educated people and make an action plan for what to do next and how to gain independence for the country. Okay. Now, why do they want independence? This also comes from the Western education itself. So the second boon was that Western education introduced the ideas of liberty, equality, freedom, justice. All these ideas were introduced to the Indians by the Western education, because when they took the Western education, when they read what the Britishers read, that time they understood that such concepts existed and so they started to fight for it. Okay, they were educated about these concepts. So the number one benefit was that they got a common language, and the number two was that they got to learn about these new concepts of liberty, equality, freedom, fraternity, justice, etc. Okay, so like I said, some of the Indians also went to England to get higher education in those times. So when they went to England, they stayed there for a long period of time. And by staying there, by studying what they studied, they could go into the depth of these concepts like the liberty, equality and fraternity. They understood how various other countries have gained their freedom, like they studied about the French Revolution or the wars of Italian unification. And from these they could realize that, okay, we're not the first one. If somebody has done it, even we can do it, is what they realized. So they studied the works of John Locke, J.S. Mill, Ruskin, Voltaire, and from their work they understood various concepts. When they stayed there, they understood that how the free institutions worked, that there existed a concept of having a parliament, of having a representation, and they understood that there was democracy. They understood the depths of democratic elections. So with all these ideas, after having learned all these things about democracy, about liberty, justice, equality, freedom, civil rights, human rights, and then they came back to India and then they worked towards the independence of the country, because they understood how important it is to have an independent country and they could now formulate completely what they wanted. Okay, so that's how Western education has contributed. Number one, it gave a common language, and number two, it educated the Indian youth about the concepts of liberty, equality, fraternity, okay, and other various concepts like justice, freedom, etc. Okay, so now moving on to the second part, that is the role of press in Indian literature. So how did the press and Indian literature contribute? Let's look into first how the press contributed. So in case of press, Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the founder of nationalistic journalism. nationalistic journals. That means newspapers or journals which had a nationalistic nature, nationalistic character, which spoke about independence, which tend to spoke against the British government. Okay, so we know that Raja Ram Mohan Roy started Samavad Kaumudi, which was a Bengali weekly in 1821, and that was of a nationalistic character. Then there were other newspapers also, other journals also that were being published. There was Dadabhai Nauroji, who edited Rast Guftar in Gujarati. There was Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who started Shoma Prakash, which was also in Bengali in 1858. But in those times, again, there were a lot of restrictions on what you could write and what you could publish in newspapers or in journals. So we read that Raja Ram Mohan Roy went to fight this through a legal way. He filed a petition in the court, right? With the help of other influential people, he filed a petition in the court regarding this. And then in the later 19th century, that is post 1850s, English newspapers started coming up. English dailies came into the picture. And there were some popular English newspapers which we even read today, like the Times of India, which was founded in 1861. Then there was Pioneer, founded in 1865. There was the Statesman, founded in 1875. So these were English dailies. But then because these were English papers, you could not really write things against the British. So they did not really go against the government. They practically favored the government. But yes, they did inform the general public about the changes going on in the country, about the political differences going on in the country. They did inform the general public about the various developments of the country. There was another newspaper which was of a nationalistic kind of a nature. That was the Amrit Bazar Patrika. This Amrit Bazar Patrika was an Anglo-Bengali weekly which was started in 1867, but later on Amrit Bazar Patrika was also converted into an English daily. Okay, there were other papers like the Tribune, which was in Lahore in 1877. There was the Hindu, which was started in Madras or the present day Chennai in 1878. Then Lokmanya Tilak started Kesari and Maratha, which spread the ideas of freedom and natural rights, those kind of ideas. So all these newspapers and journals played an important role in fueling the feeling of patriotism and in informing the people about the ideas of liberty and justice in the country. That was the role of press. Then was the role of literature, national literature. So in that period, there was the people wrote a lot. They wrote a lot about the oppression, the suppression on various subjects. On various subjects, there were many great writers in that period. Okay, like there was Rabindranath Tagore, and then there was Bharatendu Harish Chandra. He wrote a play known as Bharat Durdasha, which means India's Misery, written by Bharatendu Harish Chandra. Then there was Bankim Chandra, who wrote a novel known as Anand Mat, and today the Vande Mataram that we sing is a part of this book. Anand Mat is taken from this book Anand Mat, and Anand Mat is called to be the Bible of modern Bengali patriotism. So all these books, all this literature also fueled the feeling of patriotism within the people. Vande Mataram, it was first sung in a session of Indian National Congress held in 1896, and it drew great nationalistic feelings in the hearts of the general public also. So that's how the press, the literature and Western education have contributed towards the independence of India from the British. And that's this part. It's a small one, yeah, and it's a very easy one. It's a very general part which is very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend. Okay, that's one of the easiest parts of this chapter. Next podcast will be on the precursors or the forerunners of Indian National Congress. We'll be moving towards the formation of Indian National Congress now. And until then, if you want to listen to something soothing, beautiful, calm, beautiful, just relaxing, you can always listen to Your Life in My Voice. As I say, that keeps me going on. So yes, you can listen to that, and to get a better understanding of this chapter, I suggest you listen to the previous podcast on the first chapter, that is the War of Independence. So until then, you're listening to Faiza Inamdar at Weekly Academics, and do like the podcast, share it with your friends, subscribe the YouTube channel for continuous updates, and for all the podcasts, they're all available on YouTube. Some of them are there on Instagram. So for your doubts or your feedbacks or your comments, feel free to put it down in the comments section or DM me at weekly.academics. That's my Instagram handle. Until then, you're listening to Faiza Inamdar at Weekly Academics, and I'll get back to you soon with the precursors of Indian National Congress. Take care, be safe, be home. Bye-bye.